All right. Welcome to Learn with LUNGevity and the Mary Crowley Cancer Research Center. A special hello to all the lung cancer patients and survivors joining us from Dallas and from around the country. My name is Katie Brown. I'm the Vice President of Support and Survivorship for LUNGevity Foundation. LUNGevity is the nation's leading lung cancer nonprofit, and we're changing outcomes for people with lung cancer through research, education, and support. LUNGevity initiatives position us as thought leaders in the lung cancer advocacy community, providing programs and driving change for those with lung cancer today and in the future. And we couldn't do such important work without our sponsors, donors, supporters, and community partners like Mary Crowley Cancer Research Center. This is a virtual learning event intended for patients, caregivers, and lung cancer advocates. Please remember that this session is informative in nature only, and our staff and our expert speakers cannot offer medical advice. And please consult your doctor and healthcare team about anything and everything that you learn here today. Also, please use the chat feature to ask any questions at any time or to provide comments and feedback. There is a LUNGevity staffer monitoring that activity in real time, and I think there's some Mary Crowley Cancer Research Center staffers too. We will introduce our panel and ask each to share a little bit about who they are and what they do, and their full bios are attached to the agenda. You can find that attached to the agenda, or you can look on our website. And so I would like to start with Mr. Jose Perez. Jose,
Morning.
good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Yes, can you share with our viewers and listeners a little bit about who you are and how you're impacted by lung cancer?
Sure. Thank you again for the invite to join the panel. My name is Jose Perez, 67 years old. And I don't know that that's important or not, but I am a lung cancer survivor. I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, October of 2019. I went through the rigors of chemotherapy, 6 months. I went through 6 weeks of daily radiation, followed by immunotherapy, which helped a little bit, but some of the cancer did start coming back. Not only is cancer was in my lungs, my lymph nodes, my pelvis area, and in my spine. About October of last year, I was able to come on as a patient there at the Mary Crowley Research. So I've been treated there since then. We've seen some wonderful results. I am a man of faith, and I thank the good Lord for the breath of life and for the science that He's afforded us to be able to share with that. And so I don't know how much more or in depth you'd like me to go with that.
Well, I think that's perfect. And I have actually some more questions for you that we'll wait until we get through the introductions, and love to learn a little bit more about your survivorship. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Next, I would like to introduce Zoe Sai. I hope I said that right.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm excited about this. So my name is Zoe Sai. I'm one of the nurse practitioners here at Mary Crowley Cancer Research in Dallas, Texas. I've been part of the DFW oncology community for the past 15 years. I've worked in gene oncology, in palliative, and also in hospice. And here at Mary Crowley Cancer Research, we are involved in early phase clinical trials in both the solid tumors and also some liquid tumors. I function here as a sub-investigator on all of our trials that we conduct, probably all of them except pediatrics. And I'm part of the enrollment team that's involved in trial selection. And I also manage the patients that are on the trial. And so I'm excited, and thank you for this opportunity.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And finally, Miss Jackie Castillo is a social worker with Mary Crowley Cancer Research Center. Jackie, can you introduce yourself and your role at Mary Crowley?
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie, for having us today. My name is Jackie. I am the clinical social worker here at Mary Crowley. I have been a social worker for about 10 years now and working specifically in oncology for the past 5 years. I am the main and only social worker here at Mary Crowley, functioning with various things of dealing with barriers like financial, lodging, and of course, psychosocial.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so I would like to start with our survivor, Jose. So Jose, what did you think about clinical trials before starting this one? Had you done clinical trials before, and how did that get brought up?
Yeah, thank you. This is my first go around with research. I didn't, obviously, I was pretty much in the dark or ignorant of the benefits of the research. And it was brought to my attention as a resource and something to resort to, since I had already gone through the routines of chemo and radiation and immunotherapy and all those. And I didn't want to visit those resources again. So my oncologist, Dr. Olivares, is the one that mentioned it to me as a possibility. And of course, I would have to meet all the markers and everything else that the pharmaceuticals were looking for. There was no guarantee that I would be able to be matched with somebody, but I was very optimistic that I would be. And so I did encounter, you know, the doubt, you know, because there's so many unknowns with the research. I don't know exactly what and how it's going to work in my body, but I'm glad to say I'm here and certainly have had some positive results.
That's excellent. Did you have any misconceptions about clinical trials? I know, we support a lot of patients who might have a different idea of what clinical trials are. And we have to let them know that clinical trials can be viable treatment options. Was that something that you experienced too?
A little bit, but my wife, before she retired, worked for a rheumatologist in research.
Okay.
So I had some knowledge of it, not a whole lot, not from obviously the patient perspective, but I did have some from her experience in that.
Okay, that's good. That's really good. It's great that you can talk to somebody that can,
And
share
I
with.
apologize for the background noise here.
We are all zooming in from home. Well,
Okay.
a couple of us are zooming in from our
Okay.
home offices. So it's the nature of the world that we live in. So no worries at
Thank
all.
you.
My next question is going to go to Miss Zoe. Zoe, who oversees a clinical trial? So let's say I'm Mr. Perez, and my doctor is suggesting that I look into clinical trials. There may be a match. What's the next step that happens?
So the process after you speak to your oncologist, or if you go to clinical.gov, or you find out that there is a clinical trial that you want to be part of. Here at Mary Crowley, we have a process that you contact our administrator. And after you contact the administrator, we take over when we get all the paperwork. What we are trying to figure out is all the information, the prior treatment that we have received, everything that has been done up to now. We are going through as the enrollment team before you even come in to see us. So once we have that information in and we feel that you are a good candidate, that's when you are brought in to meet with our medical oncologist. And that's the consultation. So once you come into our clinic, you will talk to our medical oncologist, and then you will go through the trials that would have selected for you. Once that is done, and there's an agreement with both your primary oncologist and our oncologist, we will bring you back to do the screening. This is where I come in to do the screening and go through the consent, which we can talk about that later. So that is the process. And once we do the screening, and the screening part is really going through part of the treatment that we are signing you up for. We'll give you why we are choosing that treatment for you. We'll go through the risks. We will go through the logistic of the trial. And once you agree, then you can sign the consent, which is really a consent, not a contract. And when that is completed, we can run all the tests that are required by the protocol that we are signing you to. And if everything matches the protocol, you are the right patient for the right drug at the right time, then you are on the study, and then we will monitor you. I think that's in a nutshell.
Yeah, I love that. The right patient for the right treatment at the right time. I love that. That's I'm going to write that down, and I'll probably use it again. So I do have a question though. Oh, if you're looking in the chat, folks, there is a link there that says if you would like more information on the clinical trial process at Mary Crowley Cancer Research, you can visit them at www.marycrowley, that's Mary, CROWLEY.org. And I'm just reiterating that for our folks that are going to be listening in to playback on Spotify. So we talked a little bit about what those next steps are, but I'm hearing something about how you have to qualify or have certain criteria for a clinical trial. Are there things that can disqualify you from participating in a clinical trial? Can one of you explain how that works?
Well, I think the challenge that we face every time in the barriers in clinical enrollment, it's really repeating these words that we need the right patient at the right time and the right drug. So which is very, very difficult. And so there are certain things that we look for, and that can be a disqualification for you. The prior treatment, where you are with your prior treatment could be it's a very important part of qualification. The medication that you are taking for either some comorbidities can also be a disqualifier. We also have the organ function, which is a big thing, your organ function, how your kidneys are working, how your lungs, how your heart is working. All those things are put into consideration, including your performance status. But the good part or the comforting part is that we have a team here, especially here, that is working to make sure that we can overcome those barriers. The things that needs to be fixed can be fixed prior you come into the to the trial. We also work with the primary oncologist to make sure that all the requirements are met, and on the things that we can, because as I said, the challenge is finding the right patient at the right time with the right therapy.
I think one of the things that I would add to what Zoe kind of explained is that behind the scenes, there are a whole host of team and people just looking at the trials that we have available and working with the physicians. So once the physicians come in, they identify the trials for you, then there's a team of people that's going through the protocols and what will qualify and disqualify a patient and making sure that it matches the criteria. And the entire process, they're still continuing to look at that because things change, like lab values, you know, how a person is feeling day to day. So they're constantly reevaluating that. So what I see as a social worker is a whole host of team that the patients probably will never see, that are working behind the scenes, figuring out how to get that person onto study.
That's amazing. Lots of moving parts for sure. I guess let me take a couple steps back. what happens to your oncologist if he recommends a clinical trial? Do you go to a different oncologist? Do you lose your oncologist? This is a question that was sent in online, and I think the hesitation is this patient is afraid to lose her oncologist. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. It's a valid question. Really, clinical trials are part of this big puzzle. They are supposed to be part of your treatment plan, really, with your oncologist. And most of the time, the patients are able to keep their oncologist because we want to work with oncologists so that if they, at any time that we need to revisit the standard of care, we do have the oncologist. Unfortunately, we do have some patients that we get here that really don't have an oncologist because they have had some miscommunication, or they come in and say, oh, they've given up on me. They said there's nothing else that I can do. So I don't want to go back to that oncologist, which is very unfortunate because when you have a treatment team, you have to be able to trust them and they have to be able to walk through with you with this journey. So getting such patients, we try to find another oncologist for them. It rarely occurs, but oncologists can stay with you because there is an overlapping of care. When you go through this trial, you sometimes progress on the trials and then we want to revisit the standard of care. So it's easier if you have an oncologist with you than for us to look for another oncologist, or we can continue doing these trials, but the decision has to be made with everyone, including the patient, maybe the family, and also the primary oncologist. So the oncologist will be with you as long as you can communicate and be, agree on certain way with the decision making, because it's really a tough decision making process.
Right.
For me, for me, I was fortunate that my oncologist also practices there with the Mary Crowley Research Hospital, Dr. Olivares. So he was a wonderful, soothing uh, uh, transition from seeing regularly my oncologist to now a whole team of doctors. He quieted whatever nerves I may have had or apprehensions. And he's there as a resource. If I want to see him and I request him, then the staff there, will go ahead and let me. But I'm very comfortable with the staff and medical personnel that have attended me, and so we're moving along really smooth.
And just to add on that is that most of the patients that we get here, we get through the referral from the primary oncologist. Very few people do self-referral.
So we have the website for Mary Crowley. We know about clinicaltrials.gov. Do all oncologists know about clinical trials? And if you're a patient who is interested in exploring clinical trials, is that who you bring it up to? Do you bring it up to your oncologist? Do you go to clinicaltrials.gov? How do you find a clinical trial?
Well, so there is a central database that everyone does have access to clinical trials that are happening throughout the country. However, the information is fast and it's fluid. So if you do have a clinical trial that you are interested in, then yes, you can bring it up with your oncologist. But the oncologists do have this information. But I think there is a room for improvement there because you have the information is going very, very fast. And we have a dedicated team here at Mary Crowley that goes out there to make sure that we can reach as many oncologists at the right time for the right patient and for the right therapy, right? So that's my motto today. It has just started because you have that information. I mean, everybody has that information, but like we say, the information is so fast and very fluid. So definitely you can go on clinical.gov, but on clinical.gov, sometimes the lingo is very, very overwhelming for some patients. So at least talking to your oncologist is a better way. But if you do not have an oncologist, then you can come to our office and come for consultation here.
Okay. All right. Jackie, what are some of the psychosocial things that patients and their families might face when going into a clinical trial, or that you see patients face?
Yeah, I think just kind of understanding some of the misconceptions and just kind of looking at what does it look like for me? Am I going to be doing a placebo drug, or am I going to be doing an actual treatment? Um, for our patients, because we focus on phase 1 and phase 2, we primarily see a lot of patients who have progressed on their standard of care treatments. And so just kind of that anxiety and fear of what's next and what's that going to look like for me. A lot of my patients, some of them have had to stop working because they've been dealing with their cancer for some time and they can't work anymore. So dealing with the loss of income, the disability paperwork, what does that look like? How do I even start that process? It can be such an overwhelming process that knowing who to ask. Sometimes when I'm introducing myself as a social worker, most people assume that it's always associated with because I'm crazy or something's wrong with me, but that's not necessarily the case. We're going to be talking about a whole host of information, from transitioning over to things like insurance on Medicare, to understanding your rights as a employee and your rights through Americans Disabilities Act or family medical leave, understanding how that might work if you're having to come into the clinic more often. And definitely the psychosocial, the anxiety, the making sure that we're addressing those real emotions that are happening. And just kind of walking through that patient and advocating for them. I think my biggest thing as being a social worker is that I am advocating for the patient and that I make sure that they truly understand their diagnosis. You'd be surprised, even in a simple conversation, how they may not understand something, and sometimes out of fear or not knowing who to talk to, they still haven't gotten their questions answered. But if we're having a simple conversation, as a social worker and a patient, sometimes I find stuff out that I can address with the clinic team and they can get their questions answered.
That's so important to know. Yes, absolutely. An oncology social worker, patient navigator, having a case manager, they're called different things across the country, but the role is a navigating type role that really helps a patient through all of those phases. So that's so important. And thank you for all you do for patients. That said, we touched a little bit about on the financial side of it. Do patients have to pay anything to join a clinical trial?
So that is such an important question, and it is probably the top question I get asked when the patients get onboarded into the clinical trials. So yes, the short answer is yes, they do have out-of-pocket expenses. What that looks like is going to depend on each individual person and the insurance plans that they carry and where they're at with paying the out-of-pocket for the year. So in general, what the pharmaceutical companies are going to be paying for is going to be the drug that they're testing and things that would be outside of what we call standard of care. Standard of care meaning things that you would normally do at a regular oncology clinic. So some of these trials require an eye exam. That is not normal to cancer treatment. Some of them may require a cardiologist exam or clearance. That is not normal to cancer treatment. So those are going to be things that the pharmaceutical company pays for. If you have to stay in the hospital because the pharmaceutical company wants you to because they want to monitor you, they will pay for that. But things that will be processed through insurance and covered by the insurance and the patient's out of pocket would be off follow-up visits with the oncologist. If they have to do IV fluids, if they're being prescribed medications for nausea, the diarrhea, the constipation, if they're having to do their regular CT or imaging to see how the tumor is doing. any kind of, if there's a standard of care drug in combination with the pharmaceutical drug that's being tested. So all of those things that would be considered standard of care would be processed through insurance. And if the patient hasn't met their out of pocket, then yes, they would have a responsibility to pay. We do have a unique program here at Mary Crowley that I'm so happy we have. It's called the Benevolence Program. So for those who have concerns about out-of-pocket expenses, they can apply for the program. And if they get qualified, they will get help up to a certain amount with reimbursement towards their out-of-pocket expenses.
That's great to know. That's great to know. So I'd like to go back to you, Mr. Jose. I want to know, we touched a little bit about who you are and when you were diagnosed, but tell us a little bit more about your survivor story. And you touched a little bit about your wife's medical experience. Can you talk a little bit about caregivers? You know, caregivers are unsung heroes. So how do they play in this big picture of survivorship and clinical trials?
Right. Thank you. To me, again, I think the hardest part of my journey was the first 6 to 8 months with all the treatments that I was receiving, the side effects with the medicines that I was using, the support that I received at home, and the care for my wife. I'm truly blessed to have a wife by my side. You know, you're correct. Caregivers are the unsung heroes. But every time I have an opportunity to share, I'm grateful to the Lord that, you know, I do have a wife by my side that has been very supportive. She, I guess, about 40 years of her life spent in the medical field, different I guess, practices and sides of medical field. But the caregiving part was so important to me. She knew what to do as far as medical side, taking, you know, blood pressure and temperatures and monitoring those things, my medications, things of that nature. So that, you know, if we're blessed to have someone like that or find someone that can be that person, it's extremely important. But I think above all, the underlying, I guess, factor, and I, you know, I can truly say that through everything I've experienced, it's not as bad as I had read or expected to believe, you know. But I think keeping a positive attitude every day was extremely important. Not to look necessarily at the diagnosis itself, that's extremely important, but believe that every effort is being made to extend my life and to make it a quality life also.
Absolutely. And do you work, Jose?
Unfortunately, after I had been employed 14 and a half years with a local company, because I went into long-term disability, they released me from my employment. So I lost that income. I lost a lot of those benefits that came with that. Um, but for the last 45 years, I'm an ordained minister. So I have been able to continue to traveling portion of my ministry part. That did not, it was placed on hold for just a few months while I recovered my strength. But we've been going strong, still travel the country, still giving workshops, seminars. But the secular work, that part of my life ended about a year and a half ago.
And how are you finding support right now?
Okay, right now, the support that I receive is from my family. You know, not just my wife, but our children, grandchildren, great grandchildren. My
Wow.
church has been extremely supportive. You know, the core base of friends that I've developed throughout the years have been very encouraging to me. Churches that I've had in contact with throughout the years of ministry have also been extremely supportive. So I consider myself very fortunate to have a foundation of a support group. And then, of course, the medical staff has been extremely supportive to me. Jackie has been just an angel to facilitate a lot of the things that are available to the patient. So for that, I want to thank everybody for that.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So you said your children, I'm reading your bio. It says you have 17 grandchildren and 4 great grandchildren. That's amazing.
Yes.
Mhm.
For
Exhausting.
being so
That's
young, absolutely.
right, for being so very young. That's
Oh,
wonderful. That's wonderful. And what we're seeing at LUNGevity is survivors who are living better with lung cancer and survivors who are living longer with lung cancer. And part of that equation is clinical trials, because clinical trials have become viable treatment options for people with lung cancer. And I do know in our participants, I'm just scanning the names here, there are a few stage 4 patients on here that have been surviving lung cancer for many years. So you all are so inspiring and so absolutely hopeful to continue to share your story. So I'm going to get back to the questions. Thank you, Jose. Let's see. What about the ethical side of clinical trials? So there's always a lot of chatter about clinical trials and pharmaceutical companies and for-profit, nonprofit, data, all of that good stuff. Who oversees like the ethical part of clinical trials, and how do patients, how do we ensure patient safety?
yeah, I think that's such a great question. So there is a board, and for short, they usually call it IRB. It is called the Institutional Review Board. And so this is an independent body of consisting medical, non-medical, and scientific members. Their sole responsibility is to ensure the protection of rights, safety, and well-being of human subjects or patients involved in the trials. They review, approve, they provide continued review of the trial protocol and the methods and materials that's being used. So even before the clinical trials become available for patients to read, they have to be approved by the IRB. What is interesting that I found out, so part of this is making sure that they are reading through and agreeing and approving the informed consents. The informed consents are what the patients are reading to understand what the trial looks like, what they're going to be testing, and then the side effects. What if there is a new change, a new side effect, anything that's happening or a change that's significant that the patient needs to be aware of, the IRB is looking at the consents in real time and making sure that the patient is made aware so that they can make the best decision as to whether or not they want to continue with the trial or whether or not they want to stop. So it's something that constantly they're going back and forth to the IRB. And then on the internal side, through the pharmaceutical company and through the clinical trial facility, there are monitors that are constantly coming onto site and making sure that everything looks according to protocol, that the medicine is there, that everything that the clinic says that they're reporting and providing is available.
That's great.
And just to add on that, when the patients come and go through that consent, there is the information about the IRB that they can contact, because it's all about the ethical protection of our patients. And we also disclose any potential conflict that we might have when it comes to these protocols. So the patients do have that information to their disposal.
So we've mentioned informed consent a couple of times. Can we talk a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so the informed consent is a document that is relevant information to candidates who are thinking about becoming part of the clinical trial. Usually it is several pages long. It's usually very detailed, and it goes over any minute potential side effect that has been seen so far, up to the very adverse side effects that the patient may experience if they enroll into the trial. It also goes through how often they're going to have to come into the clinic, whether or not the trial is requiring a biopsy or if it's optional, how often they're going to be doing lab work. All of that is very detailed. So one of the things that they'll do when a trial is identified is they'll come back to what's called a screening appointment, where they will meet with Zoe or one of the other providers and go in detail and explaining what the trial looks like and answering any questions. If they agree to it and they answer all the questions and they don't have any questions, then they can sign the consent to move forward with the trial.
And I'll add on Jackie, I think that the informed consent really is the document that starts with the rights of the patient. It's a key part of clinical research and should never be taken for granted, because it begins with accountability, with us, the researchers, providing the necessary information to the patient. That includes why we are choosing the treatment, what kind of treatment is this, what has happened to the treatment, and how it works, the risk, the logistics. And I think the biggest thing is that after going through that consent, it ends with the patient being the ultimate decision maker, because we just have to inform the patient and then they have to make a decision. So it is voluntary at the end of the day when the patient has weighed the information, and then they can stop the clinical trial at any time, because that consent is not a contract.
That's great to know. So definitely the patient is in control and they can decide at any time. So that said, let's say that a patient is having maybe some side effects, some concerns while they're in the clinical trial. Is there someone that they can talk to? Do they call their previous oncologist? Is there a point person at the clinical trial facility? Who helps a patient that may be having an adverse effect?
So the good news is that when you are participating in clinical trials, you are the most valuable, right? You come first. You are receiving high patient quality care that's personalized, and so we do have an approach here that it's really a pretty holistic approach in managing the patients. So we do consult sometimes and use different modalities to manage some of the side effects. So we do have a 24-hour coverage for our patients here at Mary Crowley. So if you have any deviation from your baseline, because these are investigational drug, we do have a safety profile for them, but some of the stuff is unknown. So we give the patient an outlet to be able to talk to our nurses at any time of the day, at any time that you can contact and report your side effects. But we always encourage the patients that if it is really an emergency, they will have to go to the ER. But for the most things that we can support while they are on the trial, they have a 24-hour line that they can call. So they are never alone. They can report the symptoms to us.
I love that. I love that. I'm loving all your answers today, Ms. Zoe. They are never alone. So I am an absolute supporter and endorser of clinical trials. I've been on a clinical trial myself for 3 years, and not at Mary Crowley, and it's not lung cancer, but I will say that the basics of the informed consent and the fact that as a patient, I feel like I'm first and I'm being monitored very closely and very regularly puts my mind at ease. And the fact that it's working is even better. So yay, clinical trials. So I think it's really important that patients and their families understand what clinical trials are and how they can extend lives. I think one of the things that I definitely wanted to ask is what kind of trials do you guys have? Simply because in the lung cancer community, in the LUNGevity community, we have lots of patients who may have biomarkers. They may have tried certain types of treatment and are exploring things like targeted treatments, immunotherapy, maybe some different types of radiation. Can you talk a little bit about the types of research that you guys have at Mary Crowley?
So we have a variety of research right now. We know that there is immunotherapy, obviously, that has changed the landscape of treatment on all the cancers, including lung cancer. So we have the PD-1s, which are the checkpoint inhibitors that are the big one right now. But we do understand that only a few people are benefiting, and their long lasting it's not really as effective as it's supposed to be. So there's a room of improvement, right? The limitations that the PD-1s, which are the checkpointers, how can we support them? So we have a lot of trials that are looking into upregulating the T cells, because you have the PD-1, which are really inhibitory signals. All what we are going after is the T lymphocytes, right? Those are the cells that we want to be activated and then attack the cancer cells. So we have the PD-1, which is an inhibitory receptor, and then which is what I can go ahead and talk about what Jose Perez is on, because he was on PD-1 and did not get adequate response. So right now he's on a trial that is also immunotherapy, but it's working a little bit different because there's a complexity with our immune system as far as how you can regulate it. So you have the off and on switches and you need the balance. So PD-1, it's on the inhibitory side. You try to block that so that the cell can be stimulated and be able T cells to attack the cancer. He is on a CTX471, which is called a 4B11. So no, 41BB, which is a CD137. So this is a co-stimulatory. So the inhibitory and co-stimulatory. So if you can use in this setting, if you can use the CD137 to stimulate the T cells, then in case of Jose, things seems to be working fine. So those are some of the trials that we have. I think we have almost 4 trials that are working on the CD137. And we have different pharmaceuticals that can manufacture that and engineer that in different ways, because the whole idea is that you don't want to upregulate too much, right? Because when you upregulate your T cells too much, then you have autoimmune system. That is not good. So it is the balance. So that's where we are right now with some of the trials that we have about immunotherapy, but there are different players in the immunotherapy that are being tested. So if you go on our website, you can find all those trials that are actually live right now, and we're enrolling patients. But we also have some trials that are new that are actually targeting different, they're not even targeted therapy, they are actually working on the tumor environment, which is the acidic part, the pH. So we do have a trial that just came here that's about 20, I don't have my paper here, but we do have that trial. I think it's 2115 or 21/7 that has come to us that is very exciting because it's actually approaching cancer in a different way. You are approaching the acidity part of the tumor environment. Because before, traditionally the cancer, you were doing the chemotherapy and you're doing the targeted therapy to actually attack the tumor itself. And this with immunotherapy and the tumor environment, you're actually working on the environment of the where the cancer is. And this is an indirect way of getting to kill the cancer cells.
I think one of the things that I'll add on to what Zoe kind of talked about is that what I see here and what I didn't realize when I got into the world of clinical trials is that at any given point, we can have over 100 clinical trials open with about 40 to 50 ready to enroll. So because we're working with primarily phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials, the subset of people that they need to enroll is going to be a little bit smaller. And keep in mind that we're only one site, where there may be other sites around the world, China, Australia, that are also enrolling. And so it can be very competitive. And so those clinical trials, while they may be open, sometimes they're closed for enrollment. And so that can get overwhelming too. And that's part of the reason that we really encourage that if you're interested in clinical trials, have a conversation with the oncologist that you're seeing. Let them know that you're interested because they might be able to connect you with somebody that can help you navigate that really complex reading material that sometimes can be very overwhelming for a lot of people that don't know that medical jargon. And so if you have somebody that can help you kind of be your best advocate, kind of like Jose does with his wife, and she kind of understood a little bit about the clinical trials, then you can kind of work through and figure out which one's the best one for you.
So, Jackie, you mentioned phase 1 and phase 2, and a question just came in that says, what is the phases of a trial? Is that something that we can answer?
Oh, yeah, definitely we can answer. So the drug development in the clinical trial, it's really a very long process. So, it starts in the lab, which is preclinical, right? Before it comes to human subjects. So once the trial starts from the lab, go to the animals, and then it's approved by the regulatory board and also the IRB, the ethical board. Then it is allowed to be tested in humans. And that's when we come in, which is phase 1. Phase 1 is when the drug is new and it's being tested on humans. But however, now, because of the technology advancement and everything that's happening in the targeted therapy, you find some of the drugs that are in phase 1. Some of them are already in the market, but they are being combined for the first time, or they are being tried for the first time in that indication, so they are in phase 1. So there are different kinds of trials that we find here, and they're still called phase 1. Some of them, they are actually looking for a dosage, right? It's kind of like, okay, they were being given in a pill, and now we want to give them in a capsule. So they are coming to phase 1. So the good part with that is that some of these agents are being tested somewhere else, maybe for ovarian cancer, but also there is a study going for lung cancer. So you get to come here to do the phase 1 on a trial that's already on the market, but it has the potential of being effective to your kind of cancer, and that's still phase 1. So you have phase 1. For the most part with phase 1, it's smaller groups. And then you come in, it is expanded in phase 2, and it's checking for safety, it's checking for tolerability of the study, and also some efficacy. And then you move to stage 3. where there's a lot of randomization with the standard of care, because it's almost about to be the market, and then you go to phase 4. And so the research doesn't end there. There's also a post-market, when the drug is approved, then you continue following it, which is the post-market research.
That's excellent. Thank you. Thank you. So I would like to just have one last question for each of you before closing remarks. And this is something that I ask every session, every conference that I ever have. I've been a lung cancer advocate for 19 years. I lost my dad to small cell lung cancer back in 2003. So I've had the unique perch point to see that in the last 5-6 years, the innovation and impact of research has been amazing, and it really is affecting patients' lives. Patients are living better with lung cancer, and our goal is to live longer and extend that survivorship. What gives you hope? And I'd like to ask each of you, what gives you hope as we close out our session today?
I'd like to hear from Jose.
Well, Jackie
want to
gives
monopolize.
Jose hope. Jackie gives Jose hope.
Thank you. No, well, like again, when you're hit with those words, you have cancer. It wasn't something I hadn't heard before, because I lost my father to cancer. I lost a sister to cancer. And when that comes to, the diagnoses, you can be obviously overwhelming. But for me, the baseline of hope comes again from my convictions, my relationship with God, and I don't mean to make that, belittle that, because it's extremely important. And having a foundation of support group, your family, your your church group, your your peers, but to also developing a very close relationship with your oncologist and with those that are attending you. I have complete confidence that those that are attending me and taking care of me at Mary Crowley have my best interest at heart. And that, to me, is extremely comforting, that I can go there and receive my treatments and come home. And y'all mentioned something about a 24-hour line. That is so important, because there's times that I was experiencing something in my body that I wasn't used to, that I could call. So all these factors, together make a strong foundation, and I'm very confident that I will continue this journey of complete healing. And maybe someday I'll come back and say, "Hey guys, I'm done with this phases." All right. So, but it's been excellent for me. Thank you again for giving me the opportunity.
So I'll go, Jackie, I'll go before you. So now that you mentioned hope, Mary Crowley is based on hope. We give hope here. That's our motto. Hope lives here. And this hope started with our founder, Mary Crowley, who dedicated her life to actually change cancer treatment fundamentally by practicing in this early phase clinical trial. So that gives me hope, and it gives me a new perspective every time when I deal with my patient. And obviously the advancement of technology that we have to our disposal now, that we can do this genomic sequencing. There's a lot of targeted therapy. I mean, talking to lung cancer patients, just in 1999, that's when docetaxel was approved, and it was approved on a placebo-controlled study because there was nothing else. It was like, you have lung cancer, that's a life sentence. And look at where we are today. So, hey, I have so much hope to continue, because there are so many scientists and everyone working tirelessly to make sure that we can overcome this disease.
Yes. Yes.
I think that seeing patients every day come into the clinic and share their stories gives me hope. people like Jose. I mean, just the stories that they have to tell, what they have to share, what's led up to this point. They have been dealing with so much, and I cannot even begin to imagine, even though I listen to their stories day in and day out, what they deal with and the struggles and the emotions of roller coasters that they go through is unimaginable. And I think that one of the things that I tell patients, especially when they're dealing with a lot of anxiety, is what I love about hope is that the one thing that cancer cannot take away from you is hope. It doesn't matter what's going on at any given point, we can always have that. And I always continue to have that for my patients.
Absolutely. That's great. I'm so hopeful today, guys.
Can I just add this?
Yes.
Because this has been kind of like my mantra. All right. I have cancer, but cancer doesn't have me.
Right.
I love that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And to me, that's been,
Absolutely.
we talk about hope,
Absolutely.
friends. That's what it's
Absolutely.
all about.
That's exactly what it's all about. Well, thank you all for joining us today. If we did not get to your question, or if you think of a question after the fact, please email that over to us. We may answer it in a future blog or a post or an article, or maybe even another session. I'm reading the chat and it says, and I'm going to read this simply because we will have some folks listening in and they won't be able to see it. This is from Jenny. We are so inspired by our patients like Jose and are passionate about bringing hope to all patients who walk through our doors. As Zoe said, our motto is hope lives here. And then the contact information for Mary Crowley, www.marycrowley.org, or give them a call at 972-566-3000. And to complement the services and resources that you find locally in the DFW area, I'd like to share with you a few national online resources for people impacted by lung cancer through LUNGevity. So as the field of lung cancer research and patient care advances rapidly, more people are now living well with lung cancer than ever before. And LUNGevity is proud of its impact on improving outcomes for lung cancer patients through a better understanding of diagnosis, treatment, quality of life, as well as driving research and policy reforms. We have a peer-to-peer lifeline support program that connects lung cancer patients and caregivers to mentors to get and give advice, encouragement, and hope. We partner with over 400 hospitals and facilities across the country and have a large database of survivor volunteers. So if you are a survivor or a lung cancer caregiver that is looking for a mentor, connect with us and we will find you a peer mentor. We also have virtual patient support meetups 4 times a week. And this is hosted by a survivorship nurse navigator. Multiple private patient groups, caregiver groups, all online, multiple ways for people to get involved in the fight against lung cancer. We also have different groups for different oncogene types as well, and also for those diagnosed with small cell lung cancer. In the 18 years or 19 years now that I've been a lung cancer advocate, I've seen a tremendous amount of progress in lung cancer research, and you've heard about some of that here today. We know long-time survivors whose lives have been extended by participating in clinical trials. Anyone with lungs can get lung cancer, and I want patients and their families to know that they don't have to go through it alone. Visit us at www.lungevity.org to get connected. Thank you all again. Thank you to our esteemed speakers and all the attendees who zoomed in from around the country. Keep safe, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.